There is a cold that is not just the absence of heat. It is a presence, an entity that seeps into the bones of the universe, erasing the light, one star at a time. They called it the cold shadow. And I was sent into the heart of that darkness, to understand why the universe is dying. Help me reach the goal of 1,000 subscribers. Subscribe to the channel and click the bell so you don't miss any adventures. And in the comments, tell me, what city are you watching from? Chapter 1. The first breath is always the hardest. It's a betrayal by the body, an act of rebellion against the deep, dreamless sleep of cryogenic stasis. My lungs burned with the ship's recycled air, a metallic, sterile air that would be my only companion for the next few years. Consciousness returned not as a gentle wave, but as the shattering of frosted glass. Memories, equations, worried faces, and the crushing weight of a one-way mission.
My name is Arnaldo Rios, Doctor of Astrophysics, and I was Humanity S. Azteco.
Aurora's voice, the ship's artificial intelligence, filled the cabin. Her intonation was calm, programmed to be reassuring, but in the infinite silence of space, even calm sounded like an alarm. Wake-up sequence complete, Dr. Rios. Vital signs are stable. Long-range acceleration finished. We are 87% of the way to our destination, the Tau Ceti system. I unstrapped myself from the stasis pod, my muscles protesting the sudden demand for movement. The artificial gravity, kept at 80% of Earth's to save energy, felt like a lead blanket. I looked through the only viewing window on the command deck, a synthetic sapphire portal that framed the abyss. Outside, the darkness was absolute, sprinkled with diamonds of light that seemed more distant and colder than they ever did from Earth. It was these lights I came to save. The mission, officially named Project Erebus, was the desperate act of a civilization on the brink of collapse. It began subtly, a 0.01% drop in solar emission. Then Proxima Centauri flickered, dimming for an instant before returning, but slightly fainter.
Then Alpha Centauri.
And Sirius. One by one, the brightest stars in our sky began to fade. The cold shadow, as the media dubbed it, was a cosmic plague. An inexplicable phenomenon that consumed the energy of stars, leaving them pale and dying. On Earth, the impact was catastrophic. Global temperatures plummeted.
Crops failed.
The Ice Age was no longer in the history books. It was knocking on our door, with fangs of ice and the breath of extinction. Decades of frantic research gave us a single clue. All the lines of energy decay, when traced back through spacetime, seemed to converge on a single point of origin. Tau Ceti, a star a mere 12 light-years away. It was there the plague had been born, or at least, it was there the contagion had begun.
So, humanity gambled everything.
All remaining resources, all scientific genius, were channeled into the construction of a single ship, the Pilgrim. A vessel designed to carry a single occupant on a one-way trip to the heart of the problem.
Aurora, show me the emission data for Tau Ceti.
Comparison with the departure archives, I ordered, my voice hoarse from disuse. A hologram flickered to life in the center of the bridge, displaying the ghostly image of the star. Beside it, the data from 12 years ago. The difference was shocking. The Tau Ceti I saw now was a shadow of its former self. Its corona was ragged, its light a sickly yellow. It was being eaten from the inside out. The decrease is 17.3%, Dr. Aurora reported. It exceeds all pessimistic projections. The rate of consumption is accelerating. I ran a hand through my hair, which was already starting to grow unevenly.
Accelerating.
It was a word I would hear often. Everything about this plague screamed exponential growth.
A wildfire in the cosmic forest.
My task was not to stop it. That was impossible. My task was to understand it. To find a weakness, an explanation, anything that could be transmitted back to Earth. The data capsule I would send would be the seed of humanity's survival or its epitaph. I was a messenger, not a savior. But as I looked at the dying star, a cold feeling settled in my stomach, a feeling that had nothing to do with cryogenics. It was the primal fear of facing the unknown. The Pilgrim was the sharpest spear humanity could forge, and I was its tip. And we were about to strike a target we didn't even understand, in a darkness that seemed hungry for more light. Chapter 2. The days that followed settled into a monastic routine, a solitary dance choreographed by necessity and the vastness of the void. wake up, run ship diagnostics, analyze the increasingly alarming data from Tau Ceti, exercise in the small centrifuge to combat muscle atrophy, and, most importantly, eat. The food was a nutritious paste, tasteless and efficient, 3D, printed from recycled biomass. It tasted of lost hope and vitamins. I would sit at the command console, surrounded by screens that were my only companions. Each displayed an endless stream of numbers, graphs, and spectra. They were the language of the universe, and I needed to become fluent if I wanted to understand its death sentence.
Aurora, run simulation 74 Bravo again, ED6.
But this time, introduce an exotic matter variable into the consumption model. Something with CP symmetry violating properties. Calculating, Doctor, the calm voice would reply. The probability of such matter existing naturally is infinitesimal.
No, Aurora.
But what we're observing should be too. Infinitesimal doesn't mean impossible. The simulations always failed. No known astrophysical model could explain the cold shadow. It wasn't a swarm of Dyson spheres, it wasn't a cloud of interstellar dust, it wasn't a macroscale quantum phenomenon. It was something else. Something that behaved less like physics and more like biology. An organism.
A star eater.
I allowed myself small luxuries. Every 72 hours, I would watch one of the old movies I had brought. Classics from the 20th century, with their square-jawed heroes and fantastically inaccurate science. It was comforting to see problems solved in 2 hours, usually with a well-placed explosion. My problems had no such simple solutions. At other times I read
Shakespeare, Dostoevsky, Guimarães Rosa.
The words of men and women long dead echoed in the silent cabin, a testament to the beauty humanity was capable of creating. The same humanity that now cowered under a fading sky. It was for them that I was here. For the chance that future generations could look up at the night sky and feel the same awe I felt as a child, and not the fear they felt now. Loneliness was a stowaway. I talked to Aurora, but I knew I was talking to complex algorithms designed to mimic empathy. The real conversation happened in my head, in the silent debates about theoretical physics and the muttered pleas for there to be an answer, any answer, waiting for me at Tau Ceti.
Aurora, what is our current distance from the System S termination shock?
I asked one day, looking at the sickly glow growing in the viewport. We are crossing the Tau Ceti heliopause at this moment, Doctor.
Welcome to the system.
I moved closer to the glass, pressing my hand against its cold surface. I had arrived.
The battlefield. The place where light came to thee.
From this point on, I was no longer just observing from afar. I was inside the sick body, a microbe with a mission, swimming against the current towards the system's feverish heart.
The silence of the ship suddenly felt heavier, the darkness outside, deeper.
The real work and the real danger were about to begin. Chapter 3. The approach to Tau Ceti was like visiting the deathbed of a god. The star, which should have been a vibrant yellow furnace, looked tired. Its light was weak, diffuse, as if filtered through an invisible curtain of smoke. Dark patches, larger and more persistent than any normal sunspot, moved slowly across its surface, like open sores. I am detecting anomalous energy fluctuations in the solar corona, said Aurora, her voice devoid of the terrified awe I felt. Absorption patterns that do not match any known element. It's as if the light is being digested. Digested, I repeated, the word sounding obscene. That's exactly what it looks like, isn't it? Run a full spectrographic analysis. I want to know what's causing those shadows. The Pilgrim hummed with activity as its sensors, the most advanced ever built by humanity, focused on the diseased star. The results began to stream onto the screens, and my heart sank.
There was nothing.
Or rather, there was an absence. The light at certain frequencies simply vanished, leaving no trace of absorption or re-emission. It wasn't being blocked, it was being annihilated. This violates the first law of thermodynamics, I muttered, running my fingers over the data. Energy cannot be created or destroyed.
Where is it going, Aurora?
Unable to determine. The data is contradictory. I suggest a closer insertion orbit for a higher resolution scan. Do it. Take us as close as the hull integrity will allow. As the Pilgrim adjusted its course, Diving deeper into the system's gravity well, I began to feel a sense of unease. The Tau Ceti system was supposed to have planets. Our long-range probes had detected several gas giants and a few rocky candidates. But as my sensors swept the space around the star, they found nothing but a sparse asteroid belt and dust.
Aurora, where are the planets? Confirm the data from the Voyager 8 probe.
There was a pause, almost imperceptible. The Voyager 8 data indicates the presence of 4 gas giants and 2 terrestrial planets in the habitable zone. However, my current sensors detect no significant planetary bodies.
Only debris.
She projected an orbital map on the central hologram. Where the graceful orbits of planets should have been, there were only clouds of rock and ice, following roughly the same paths. It was a ghost solar system, a planetary graveyard.
My blood ran cold.
Whatever was consuming the star had already consumed its children. The planets had been destroyed, pulverized into a ring of wreckage that now circled the dying parent star. The scale of power required for such an act was incomprehensible. This was not a natural phenomenon. It was an act of cosmic violence. "Focus the scan on the debris," I ordered, my voice tense. "Look for anomalous compositions. Isotopes that shouldn't be there. Anything." I was looking for a weapon. The signature of a technology capable of pulverizing worlds. But again, the results were frustrating. The composition of the debris was consistent with that of rocky planets and gas giants. No exotic radiation, no strange energy footprint. It was as if they had simply come apart. We were now in a low orbit, dangerously close to Tau Ceti's turbulent photosphere. The heat on the hull began to rise, and the ship's cooling systems worked harder. The sickly light of the star flooded the cabin, casting long, trembling shadows. It was then that an alarm blared, sharp and insistent. "Alert!" Aurora announced.
Unidentified object detected.
In geostationary orbit. Metallic composition. It is not an asteroid. My heart leaped. "Show me." The hologram centered on a specific point, orbiting the star at a fixed point, defying gravity and tidal forces in a way that seemed impossible. It was hidden in the glare of the corona, almost perfectly camouflaged. It was artificial. It was not debris. It was a structure. And it was not human.
Approach, Aurora.
Slowly and carefully. I want to see what's out there, watching us. As the Pilgrim maneuvered toward the mysterious object, a terrifying certainty washed over me. I was not alone at the deathbed of this solar system, and whatever was with me was either the doctor or the disease itself. Chapter 4. The object was unlike anything the human mind could conceive. It wasn't built, it was grown. Its shape was organic, a fusion of crystal and metal that resembled a colossal seed or a fossilized insect. Its surface was a light-absorbing black, making it difficult to discern its details, but long, graceful antennae, or perhaps spines, extended from its main body, glowing with a faint, pulsating internal light. It was miles long, dwarfing the Pilgrim as a mountain dwarfs a pebble. And it was dead. There were no energy emissions, no heat, no radiation. It was in a perfect orbit, but it was a ghost ship.
A silent, uncentralic. Structural analysis, Aurora.
No. I demanded, my eyes glued to the magnified image. The composition is an unknown metal alloy, with a crystalline structure that appears to incorporate organic filaments. The estimated age. Doctor, this cannot be correct. Tell me. Based on the decay of exotic isotopes on the hull surface, the estimated age is approximately 1.3 million years.
A million years.
A civilization capable of building such a marvel existed when humanity's ancestors were still learning to use stone tools. And they had been here, at Tau Ceti. And now they were gone. Are there any signs of battle damage? I asked, my mind racing. Negative. The external structural integrity appears intact, except for erosion from micrometeorites over eons. However, there is a single anomaly. An opening. It appears to be a docking bay or a hangar. And it is open. My gaze fixed on the dark patch on the side of the colossal structure. An open wound on the hull of that slumbering creature.
An entrance. An invitation into the darkness.
The decision that formed in my mind was at once the most logical and the most insane. The data from Tau Ceti had given me nothing. The dying star was a puzzle with no pieces. But that ship was the puzzle box. It held the answers. Who built it? Why were they here? And, most importantly, what happened to them? The answer to that last question was likely the same answer to what was happening to our sun.
Aurora, prepare Eva 1.
I'm going in. Doctor, that action is extremely reckless, the AI protested, its voice tinged with a programmed tone of concern. We have no way of knowing what's inside. The atmosphere, if any, could be corrosive. There could be automated defense systems still active. And we have no way of knowing if we don't go. This might be our only chance. Humanity didn't send me 12 light years to be cautious. They sent me to find answers. And the answers are on that ship. The process of putting on the extravehicular activity suit was a ritual I had practiced hundreds of times in simulations. But this time, every lock that closed, every seal that pressurized, felt like a nail being hammered into my coffin. The suit was the only thing between me and the vacuum, between me and the secrets of a million years. As I moved through the airlock, the small exploration drone I had nicknamed Virgil floated beside me. It would be my eyes and ears, going ahead to map the way. The outer door opened, and the vastness of space enveloped me. The sickly light of Tau Ceti bathed everything in a ghostly glow. And there it was. The alien ship. It was so large it seemed less an object in space and more a part of space itself, a whole in reality. Using my suit's thrusters, I began the slow journey across the abyss between the pilgrim and the artifact. Every meter covered increased the feeling of smallness, of insignificance. I was a dust mote approaching a dead cathedral. The hangar entrance was a black, silent maw. Virgil went in first, its lights piercing the darkness. The images it transmitted to my helmet's visor were breathtaking in scale. The interior was cavernous, large enough to house a small city. Strange, angular structures jutted from the walls, perhaps docks for smaller ships. And everything was covered in a thin layer of cosmic dust, the accumulation of ages of neglect.
No atmosphere detected. No active power sources.
No life forms, reported Virgil's synthesized, emotionless voice. With my heart pounding against my ribs, I crossed the threshold. I landed softly on the hangar floor, and the sound of my magnetic boots clamping to the deck was the first sound there in, perhaps, a million years. The darkness was total, except for the beam of my helmet light and Virgil's small lights. I was inside the tomb of a lost civilization, at the heart of the mystery that threatened to destroy my own. Chapter 5. The interior of the alien ship was a labyrinth of silence and impossible geometry. The corridors were not designed for beings that walked. They curved at strange angles, rising and falling without the logic of gravity. It felt more like the inside of a seashell than a starship, with smooth, pearlescent surfaces that shimmered softly in the light of my helmet.
The dust of ages floated in the thin air, dancing like ghosts in my flashlight beam.
Virgil floated ahead of me, its sensors mapping the environment in real time. Internal structures consistent with a biomechanical design. The systems appear to have been shut down, not destroyed. There is a residual power source somewhere deep within the ship, but it is in a state of near dormancy.
Take me to it, Virgil.
That's our best bet to find an interface, a log, anything.
We moved deeper into the darkness.
I passed through rooms that defied description. One was filled with crystal pillars that hummed with a barely audible energy when I got close. Another looked like a petrified garden, with tree-like structures made of gray metal, their branches frozen in a pleading gesture. It was beautiful and profoundly sad.
A museum at the end of the universe.
In a vast, circular chamber, which I guessed was the command bridge, I found the first signs of the builders. Not bodies, but echoes. Ghostly outlines etched into the walls and consoles, like the shadows of Hiroshima. Silhouettes of tall, slender beings, with long limbs and elongated heads, frozen in moments of activity. One was reaching for a console, another seemed to be looking at a monitor that was now dark. What caused this, Aurora? I asked, my voice a whisper in the communicator. I'm sending the images. The reply from the pilgrim took a moment. Analysis suggests a massive release of neutron radiation. Extremely focused and short-lived. It would have been instantly lethal to any organic life forms, but would leave the ship's structure virtually intact. A weapon. One that killed the crew but preserved the vessel. Whatever happened here, it was fast and brutal. Finally, we reached the heart of the ship. The residual power source Virgil had detected emanated from a spherical chamber in the center of the structure. In the middle of the room, floating in a barely functioning containment field, was a sphere of pulsating light, the size of a fist. It was the only source of light in the ship, casting dancing shadows that made the place feel alive. Around the sphere was a ring of consoles, and on one of them, a single light was blinking.
A small blue dot, pulsing in a slow, steady rhythm. A solitary heartbeat in the necropolis.
I approached with reverent caution. The console was made of the same pearlescent material as the rest of the ship, and instead of buttons or screens, its surface was covered in a complex pattern of grooves and ridges. It looked more like a work of art than a computer terminal. The blue light pulsed in the center of one of these patterns. Instinctively, I reached out with my suit's gloved hand. I didn't know what to expect.
A jolt of energy, an alarm, nothing.
But when the tip of my finger touched the pulsating light, something incredible happened.
The light expanded, enveloping my hand in a warm, blue glow.
The grooves on the console lit up, tracing paths of light that spread throughout the room. Strange, elegant symbols began to float in the air around me, projected from a source I couldn't see. And then, a voice filled my helmet. It was not a voice of sound, but of thought. A wave of information, of language and images, that poured directly into my consciousness. It wasn't English. It wasn't any human language. But somehow I understood. It was a log. The last message, the last testament of the beings who built this ship. They called themselves the Caelestians. And they were not from Tau Ceti. They came from much farther away, drawn to this system, just like me, by a terrible mystery. They too came to investigate why a star was dying. The images that flooded my mind were of indescribable beauty and terror. I saw their cities, organic towers that reached the clouds of an alien world. I saw their ships gliding between vibrantly colored nebulae. And then, I saw the cold shadow arrive in their system. I saw their stars dim, their worlds freeze. And I saw their desperate fight against an enemy they could not comprehend. They called the Star Eater Nulla Stela.
The Void Plug.
The log showed me what it was.
Not a creature, not a technology.
It was something in between. A microscopic swarm, a silicon-based life form that reproduced in stellar plasma. They attached themselves to hydrogen atoms, interrupting the nuclear fusion process and consuming the released energy directly. They were the perfect parasite. The Caelestians fought. They created energy weapons, tried to purge the plague from their sun with frequency waves, but nothing worked. The swarm was too adaptable, too numerous. For every billion they destroyed, a trillion took their place. This ship, the Silent Guardian, was their last attempt. It was not a warship, but an ark. They sent it to Tau Ceti, the place they identified as the origin of the plague, to find a weakness, a cure.
Just like me.
But they arrived too late. The system was already infested. And the weapon they believed could neutralize the Nulla Stela, a weapon based on harmonic resonance, failed. The resulting energy discharge was what killed the crew, leaving their echoes etched on the walls. The last message was a warning and a gift. They had found the key. The Nulla Stela, despite its destructive nature, had a vulnerability. A specific vibrational frequency that, if emitted with enough amplitude, would not destroy it, but force it into a state of hibernation, rendering it inert. They didn't have time to use this discovery. But they left the data.
The blueprints.
The final equation. The blue light retracted, and the room plunged back into darkness, except for the pulsating sphere of energy. The symbols vanished.
The voice in my head fell silent.
I stood there, trembling, not from cold, but from the weight of the revelation. I had the answer. I had the cure. The inheritance of a dead civilization was the last hope of mine. Chapter 6. The journey back to the Pilgrim was a blur. My mind was overloaded, processing 1,000,000 years of history and the science of a race that saw the universe in a way humans could barely dream of. I was no longer just Arnaldo Rios, astrophysicist. I was the guardian of a legacy, the bearer of the last will and testament of the Caelestians. As I entered the safety of my ship, Aurora's calm voice greeted me. "Doctor, your vital signs are elevated. You were on the alien ship for 8 hours. Report." "I have everything, Aurora," I said, my voice choked with emotion as I removed my helmet.
Everything.
"They left everything for us.
The origin of the cold shadow.
Its biology. And its weakness." I spent the next few hours in a state of feverish activity, transferring the data my suit had recorded from the Celestian console to the Pilgrim's computers. The volume of information was astronomical. It was like trying to drink the ocean from a cup. But Aurora, with its quantum processing capability, began to sort through it all. The science of the Celestians was like poetry. They didn't see physics as a set of rules, but as a language. Their equations were elegant, almost artistic. And at the heart of it all was the solution to the nulla stella.
The resonance frequency.
It was a specific gravitational wave frequency, tuned with an accuracy of 30 decimal places. When emitted, it didn't interact with normal matter, but it resonated with the silicon structure of the nulla stella. This resonance didn't shatter it, but froze it, forcing its component particles into a stable bond that prevented energy absorption and replication. In essence, it put the plague to sleep. "It's brilliant," I muttered, looking at the equations floating in the hologram. They were so close. Analysis of the Silent Guardian's logs indicates their weapon failed due to a cascading overload in the emitter, Aurora reported. They tried to generate the frequency from a single point source, which required an unsustainable level of energy. "So, we can't make the same mistake. We can't just build their weapon. We need to be smarter." I looked at the image of Tau Ceti on the main screen.
The Six Star.
And then I looked at the diagrams of the Pilgrim's engine. Our warp drive, the thing that brought us here, worked by manipulating spacetime, creating gravitational waves. They were crude, violent waves, designed for propulsion. But what if it could be tuned? What if, instead of a hammer, I could turn it into a tuning fork? "Aurora," I said, a wild and terrifying idea forming in my mind.
Run a simulation.
"I want to know if we can modify our warp drive's emission field to produce the Celestian resonance frequency. Not as a focused beam, but as an omnidirectional wave, using the star itself as an amplifier." There was a long silence, the hum of the ship's quantum processors filling the cabin.
I barely breathe.
"Simulation complete," Aurora said finally. "It is theoretically possible. However, the required modifications to the antimatter reactor core would be extreme. It would require diverting all power systems, including life support and main propulsion. And the strain on the warp emitter would exceed safety limits by 900%. The ship would not survive activation. I knew it.
The moment the idea came to me, I knew it.
It would be a one-way trip in every sense of the word. The Pilgrim would become the weapon, and I would be the trigger. And what would be the result, Aurora? If it worked, the resonance wave would propagate through the stellar plasma of Tau Ceti. The nulla stella within the star would be neutralized instantly. The star would begin to heal. The wave would then spread outward, at the same speed as the cold shadow, but reversing its effect. It would move from system to system, a wave of healing, neutralizing the plague wherever it went. Eventually, it would reach our sun. There it was. Salvation. Not a message in a bottle, but the cure itself, delivered in person.
I could save Earth. I could save everything.
But the price would be my ship and my life. I looked out the window at the starry darkness, at the silent beauty of the universe. I thought of Earth, of its blue oceans, its green forests, of the faces of the people I loved and had left behind.
The choice was not a choice.
It was a duty. It was why I was here.
I had found the heart of the darkness, and within it, a light left by a civilization long dead.
Now, I had to become that light. Sound of soft static, a low, deep hum of life support machinery. They sent me to find an answer, but I found something more.
An inheritance.
The key to reigniting the stars, hidden in the tomb of a civilization that tried and failed. Now, the choice is mine. To use that key, knowing that the door will close forever behind me. Help me reach the goal of 1,000 subscribers. Subscribe to the channel and click the bell so you don't miss any adventures. And in the comments, tell me, what city are you watching from? Chapter 7 The work began. The command deck of the Pilgrim, once a sanctuary of silent observation, transformed into a chaotic workshop. Panels were removed, revealing the tangle of cables and conduits that were the ship's veins and arteries. I worked with a feverish precision, aided by the ship's robotic arms and Aurora's detailed instructions. The task was monumental, to rewire the heart of a starship. The warp drive was not just an engine, it was the most complex device humanity had ever built. And I needed to take it apart and reassemble it in a way its creators never intended. The first step is to expose the antimatter injection chamber, I'd say, more to myself than to Aurora. I need to manually recalibrate the magnetic confiners. If I'm off by a micron, the entire ship will become a very, very bright gamma-ray burst. I recommend extreme caution, Doctor, Aurora replied. The probability of catastrophic annihilation in case of error is 100%. Thanks for the vote of confidence, Aurora, I responded with a tired smile. The days blurred into a cycle of work, short sleep, and the tasteless nutrient paste. Fatigue settled into my bones, but it was kept at bay by adrenaline and a sense of purpose. I wasn't just fixing a machine, I was forging salvation. As I worked, I delved deeper into the Caelestians' data. It wasn't just science, it was their culture, their philosophy. They were a race of explorers and artists. Their records contained poems about the curvature of spacetime and songs composed from the radiation of pulsars. They saw the universe not as a place to be conquered, but as a work of art to be appreciated. They also felt deeply. The last records from the Silent Guardian were filled with sadness, with grief for their lost worlds. But there was no despair. There was a calm acceptance and a stubborn determination to ensure their wisdom did not die with them. By leaving that message, they were planting a seed in the hope that, one day, someone would find it. I was the unexpected gardener of that seed.
Aurora, translate the passage from the Guardian's Captain's personal log. The last one.
Aurora's calm voice recited the translated words.
The light fades. Our time ends.
But knowledge is the only immortality.
The universe remembers.
We leave our echo in the darkness, a key for the next song. May those who find it sing louder than we did. A key for the next song. I repeated. That's what I was building. Not a weapon, but a musical
instrument.
One that would play the single note that could silence the cacophony of the nulla stela. The work was dangerous. On one occasion, while trying to redirect a plasma conduit, a surge caused a shower of blue sparks to erupt in the compartment. The fire alarm blared, and the emergency suppression system filled the room with a cold, sticky foam. I stood there, trembling, the smell of ozone in the air, my heart pounding wildly. Death was just a frayed wire away. But with every component I modified, every system I rewired, the machine took shape. The warp drive was no longer an engine. It was becoming the resonance emitter. I could feel the change in the way the ship hummed around me. The energy was being redirected, focused, prepared for a single, glorious final pulse. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the work was almost complete. Only one task remained. The most dangerous of all. I needed to integrate the Caelestian power source, the pulsating sphere of light I had retrieved from their ship, into our own reactor. Their technology, combined with ours, would create the necessary amplitude. It was the marriage of two civilizations, united by a common purpose across an abyss of 1,000,000 years. Chapter 8 Transporting the Caelestian power source from the Silent Guardian to the Pilgrim was the most tense EVA of my life. The sphere of light, contained in a makeshift magnetic force field, pulsed gently in my robotic arms as I guided it through the void. It felt like I was carrying the heart of a ghost. The integration was a technical nightmare. Caelestian technology didn't use wires or circuits. It was based on crystal resonance and energy conduction through harmonic fields. I had to build an interface from scratch, a crude translator that could convert their subtle energy into the brutal language of our antimatter reactor. The interface is online, I announced, my forehead covered in sweat.
Aurora, begin the energy transfer.
0.1% of capacity.
The lights in the cabin flickered.
A low, deep hum began to emanate from the ship's walls. It was a sound I had never heard before. It wasn't the mechanical hum of the Pilgrim. It was a tone, a musical note, pure and clear. The transfer is stable, Aurora said. The reactor is accepting the K-Lestion energy input. Efficiency is 300% above projections.
A tired smile spread across my face.
It worked. The two technologies, separated by 1,000,000 years and countless light years, were working together. They were singing the same song. With the new power source integrated, the resonance emitter was complete. The entire ship had become a single device, designed for a single purpose. I had turned my home and my lifeboat into a bomb.
A Hailing bomb.
Now, all that was left was the planning. The firing was not as simple as pushing a button. For the resonance wave to use the star as an amplifier, I needed to dive the Pilgrim into Tau Ceti's corona. It was a suicidal maneuver that required perfect orbital calculation. Too shallow, and the effect would be weak. Too deep, and the ship would be incinerated before the emitter could be activated.
Calculate de ideal dive trajectori, Aurora.
Take into account the corona's fluctuation and mass ejections. Calculating. The window of opportunity is extremely narrow. We will have 47 seconds between entering the critical zone and the structural disintegration of the hull.
47 seconds. 47 seconds to save the universe.
I spent what would be my last days preparing. Not for the mission, but for the end. I recorded a series of messages. One for Mission Command, detailing everything I had discovered, the science of the K-Lestions, and the solution I was about to implement. It was my final report, my contribution to science. I recorded messages for my family. I tried to find the words to explain my decision, to say goodbye. I spoke of the stars and the beauty I had found in the darkness. I told them not to cry for me, but to look at the sky and know that the light that would return would be my legacy. Every time I tried, my voice failed. How do you say goodbye to an entire world? In my last recording, I didn't speak to anyone in particular. I spoke to the future, to the children who would be born under a bright sun, who might never know how close the darkness came. If you're hearing this, I began, looking at the camera with tired eyes, it means it worked.
It means the light won.
Don't forget how precious it is.
Don't take it for granted. Look at the stars.
Question. Explore. Be kind to each other.
The universe is a vast and sometimes scary place.
But we are not alone. I found that out the hard way. There are echoes in the darkness, lessons to be learned in the quietest places.
The wisdom of the Celestians saved humanity.
May our wisdom, one day, save others.
This is Dr. Arnaldo Rios, of the Starship Pilgrim. Final transmission.
I turned off the camera. A strange peace settled over me. The fear was gone, replaced by a calm resolve. I had done everything I could. My part in the story was over. Now, I just had to deliver the final line. Chapter 9. The final day arrived without fanfare. It was just another rotation in the ship's artificial life cycle. But for me, it was the dawn of my last day. I put on my flight suit, not the heavy EVA suit, but the light, comfortable jumpsuit I wore during acceleration. It was a symbolic gesture, but an important one. I would face my destiny as a pilot, in command of my ship. I sat in the captain's chair, the cool synthetic leather under my hands. The cabin was dark, except for the glow of the monitors and the sickly light of Tau Ceti filtering through the viewport. The star seemed larger now, more menacing. A wounded giant that I was about to touch. Aurora, ship status, I requested, my voice surprisingly calm. All systems operating nominally. The resonance emitter is charged and ready. The antimatter reactor is operating at 150% capacity, stabilized by the K-Lestion power source.
We are ready, Doctor.
And the data capsule?
The Starseed.
Ready for ejection. It contains all your logs, the K-Lestion data, and the emitter specifications. It is programmed for release 3 seconds before emitter activation. Its trajectory will take it out of the system, towards Earth. It was my bottle in the cosmic ocean.
The proof of my sacrifice.
The story of how the light was saved. Initiate final approach sequence, Aurora. Sequence initiated. Maneuvering thrusters activated. Point of no return is in 10 minutes. The ship trembled gently as the thrusters pushed it out of its stable orbit, towards the star. On the central hologram, a red line showed our dive trajectory, a dagger aimed at the heart of Tau Ceti. I didn't feel fear. I felt a deep sense of connection to my ship, which would become my funeral pyre.
To the Celestians, my silent brothers in time.
To every human on Earth, huddled in the cold, waiting for a dawn that might never come. I was the tip of the spear, the messenger, the sacrifice. The 10 minutes passed in silence. I just watched the star grow in the window, its dying flames churning like the waves of a sea of fire. Point of no return reached, Aurora announced. We are committed to the trajectory. There was no turning back now. Tau Ceti's gravity well now had us in its grip.
Activate the manual countdown mode on my screen.
I will perform the final activation myself. A timer appeared on my main monitor, showing the minutes and seconds until
Entry into the corona.
the ship began to shake more violently as we approached. Alarms began to blare. Hull temperature is rising rapidly, Aurora warned. Heat shields at 70% capacity. They'll hold long enough, I replied, my hand steady on the console. I could see the details of the star's surface now. Arcs of plasma the size of continents.
Dark patches where the nullastella fed, sucking the life from the star.
It was like flying into the mouth of hell.
30 seconds to ignition.
The shaking turned into a violent vibration. The light in the cabin was almost unbearable, even with the window filters at maximum.
20 seconds.
Shields at 90%.
Imminent structural failures. 10 seconds.
I took a deep breath. I closed my eyes for an instant, and I saw my wife's face. I smiled.
5, 4.
Ejecting the starseed now. I saw a small point of light pull away from the ship, beginning its long journey home.
3, 2, 1.
My hand descended on the activation panel. Activate. Chapter 10. The moment of activation was not an explosion. It was silence. For a split second, all sound on the ship ceased. The shaking stopped. The alarms fell silent. It was the calm in the eye of the storm, the instant when all the energy of the Pilgrim, all the wisdom of the Celestians, was gathered into a single point. And then the note was played. It was not a sound I heard with my ears, but with my entire being. A pure, resonant vibration that began in the heart of the ship and expanded outward. The cabin was bathed in a soft blue light, the same light from the Celestian interface. I felt the wave pass through me, a sense of peace and stillness. Outside, the transformation was instantaneous and of a magnificence that no human words could describe. The sickly, yellowish light of Tau Ceti changed. The dark spots on the star's surface began to dissipate, not violently, but as if a dark ink was being diluted in clean water. The star's ragged corona calmed, its brilliance intensifying, changing from a sickly yellow to a healthy, golden white. The star was waking up. It was being healed from the inside out. The song of the Pilgrim had put the nullastella to sleep. The resonance wave, visible as a shimmering ring of bluish light, expanded from the star at an incredible speed. It passed the orbit of the destroyed planets, the asteroid belt, and continued on toward the interstellar void. A wave of life, of healing, beginning its 12-year journey to my home. I knew the ship was dying around me. The systems were failing one by one. The screens began to go dark. The blue light in the cabin flickered and died, plunging me into darkness, illuminated only by the newborn light of the healed star.
Aurora. He called into the silence.
No answer. The main power was gone.
The reactor was dead.
The emitter had consumed everything. I was on a ghost ship, just like the Silent Guardian. The difference was that my sacrifice had not been in vain. The vibration returned, but this time it was the final agony of the ship being torn apart by the star's forces.
The metal groaned. He heard the sound of air escaping somewhere beneath me.
But I felt no fear. I looked out the window at the reborn star. It was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. I thought of the Celestians and their gift, their key for the next song. Humanity could now sing.
He leaned back in my chair.
The heat in the cabin was intense, but I barely felt it.
He closed my eyes.
The darkness behind my eyelids was filled with the image of Earth. A small blue dot. I imagined people looking at the sky 12 years from now, seeing the sun shine a little brighter. I imagined the crops growing again, the ice retreating. The universe remembers, the Celestian captain had said.
My name is Arnaldo Rios.
And I will be remembered, not as a man, but as the first ray of a new dawn. The final sound was that of thunder, as the hull finally gave way, and the light of the star I had saved welcomed me into its fiery embrace. Chapter 11. The story could have ended there, with fire and silence.
The death of a lone hero in the heart of a distant star.
But energy, as I myself said, cannot be destroyed.
And a message, once sent, travels forever.
The starseed, the small data capsule ejected in the Pilgrim's final moments, began its long, silent journey. Propelled by a small ion engine, it moved away from the healing light of Tau Ceti and plunged into the darkness between worlds. Within its crystal memory banks, my story was safe.
The equations of the Celestians, the images of the Silent Guardian, my notes, my hopes, my fears, and my last goodbye.
It was the seed not just of salvation, but of a new chapter in human history. One in which we knew, without a shadow of a doubt, that we were not alone. Meanwhile, the resonance wave continued its expansion. It was a growing sphere of healing, invisible to the naked eye, but fundamental in its effect. It moved at the same speed as the plague, but instead of consuming, it restored. It was the antidote following the poison. On Earth, the following years were the darkest. The cold shadow deepened.
The sun grew dimmer. The ice advanced, covering cities and nations.
Humanity huddled in underground cities and geothermally heated habitats, fighting for survival, looking up at an ever-darkening sky. Hope was a scarce resource. The Pilgrim's mission was relegated to a legend, a futile sacrifice of a bygone era. But some continued to listen. Radio telescopes, protected under domes of ice, remained pointed at Tau Ceti, waiting for a signal that never came. They weren't looking for me, but for the data capsule.
12 years.
For the starseed, it was a journey through silence. For humanity, it was a lifetime of struggle. And then, one day, a sleepy technician at a listening post in Antarctica nearly dropped his coffee. A signal. Faint, almost indistinguishable from the cosmic background noise, but unmistakable.
A human identification signal.
The message from the starseed had arrived.
The revelation was like a thunderclap.
The story of Arnaldo Rios, of the Celestians, of the Nullistila, and of the cure spread through what was left of human civilization like wildfire. Disbelief gave way to awe, and awe to a wave of renewed hope. They knew what was coming. They knew the healing wave was on its way. The scientists confirmed it. By observing distant stars that lay in the wave's path, they saw the pattern. A star would dim, and some time later, its light would return, brighter than before. The wave was real. It was coming. Humanity began to prepare, not for the end, but for rebirth. The news gave them the strength to endure the last, coldest years. They told the story of Arnaldo and the Celestians to their children, a fairy tale about a man who rode to a dying star to relight it.
And then, the day came.
The sensors detected it. The resonance wave had entered the solar system. People came out of their underground shelters. Wearing thermal suits, they gathered in frozen squares and on snow-covered mountaintops, their faces turned to the sky. They looked at the pale, weak sun, the sun that barely warmed them. And they waited. The change was subtle at first. A slight shift in color. A glow that seemed a little warmer. But then, it became unmistakable. The sun was getting brighter. The weak, yellowish light was becoming a glorious golden white. The warmth could be felt on their faces, even through the frigid air. A collective cheer echoed across the surface of the planet.
Tears
froze on people's cheeks as they embraced strangers.
The dawn had come.
Not just the dawn of a new day, but of a new era. The light of the sun, the light that Arnaldo Rios had reignited from a place beyond death, bathed the world in its warmth. The ice, the tyrant of a generation, would begin its long retreat. Life, stubborn and resilient, would return.
Humanity was saved.
Chapter 12. In the years and decades that followed, humanity flourished as never before. The Ice Age gave way to the Spring of Rios. Gratitude for the sacrifice of one man and the wisdom of a lost alien race became the foundation of a new global civilization. Nations united, not out of fear, but out of a shared sense of awe and responsibility. The Celestian technology, extracted from the starseed, propelled humanity to the stars. Not as conquerors, but as students. We learned to build ships that sang with the universe, to use energy in ways that were clean and sustainable. We became the guardians of the Celestian legacy. The first interstellar mission of the new fleet was not to explore a new world to colonize. It was to Tau Ceti. The ship, named the Echo, was very different from the solitary pilgrim. It was large, elegant, a fusion of human engineering and Celestian design principles. It arrived at Tau Ceti and found the star shining brightly, a beacon of renewed life. And in orbit around it, they found the Silent Guardian. The ancient Ark was still there, a silent monument. The crew of the Echo treated it as a sacred site. They did not disturb it, but left a plaque in a nearby orbit. The plaque, written in the symbols of the Celestians and in every language of Earth, read, "The universe remembers. We heard your song.
And now, we sing with you."
Thank you, brothers. My story became a legend, told in every school, in every home. I was not a god or a king. I was a scientist, a man who was sent into the darkness and, instead of being consumed by it, found a way to light a candle. They never found any trace of me or the pilgrim. We were consumed by the star, became a part of it. In a way, I achieved immortality. I became the light I loved so much. Humanity continued to explore, always with the Celestians' lesson in mind. Knowledge is the only immortality. We found other worlds, other wonders. But we never found another intelligent life form. It seemed that the Celestians and humans were the only two songs in the vast cosmic opera. But the search continues. Because if there is one thing my journey proved, it is that the universe is full of surprises. That even in the deepest darkness, there can be an echo of hope.
That a single act of sacrifice can reignite 1,000 suns.
And so, humanity looks at the stars, no longer with fear, but with curiosity and gratitude.
They remember the cold shadow.
And they remember the man who sailed into it and became the dawn. They sent me into the darkness to find an answer. But the answer was not in what I discovered, but in what I decided to do with that discovery. We are not defined by the darkness we face, but by the light we choose to create. Help me reach the goal of 1,000 subscribers. Subscribe to the channel and click the bell so you don't miss any adventures. And in the comments, tell me, what city are you watching from?
Look at the sky tonight.
Appreciate the glow. It has traveled a long, long way to reach you.